If you think swiping right is the scariest part of online dating, wait until you hear what happened to these people. Some went on dates that ended with police involvement. Others barely escaped with their lives. And one person discovered their match was living a double life that sounds straight out of a horror movie. Stick around because number 3 is absolutely insane. Online dating has become the normal way people meet nowadays. You open an app, swipe through some photos, exchange a few messages, and boom, you've got a date lined up for Friday night. Sounds simple, right? Except sometimes, that person smiling in their profile picture isn't exactly who they say they are. And sometimes, what starts as a casual coffee date turns into a situation where you're genuinely questioning your survival skills. Now, before we jump into these stories, I need to make something clear. Most people on dating apps are normal humans just looking for connection. But the internet has this wonderful ability to give dangerous people easy access to victims. And dating apps have become the perfect hunting ground for some truly disturbing individuals. These aren't just awkward first dates or catfishing situations where someone used photos from 10 years ago. These are encounters that went from bad to potentially deadly real quick. So here's the problem with dating apps that nobody really talks about. When you meet someone in person, through friends, or at work, there's usually some kind of social verification happening. Your friend vouches for them, or you see how they interact with other people over time. But with dating apps, you're essentially meeting a complete stranger who could be literally anyone. They could be lying about their name, their job, their relationship status, or their intentions. And you're agreeing to meet this person, often alone, in private locations. When you actually think about it, it sounds like the setup for every true crime documentary ever made. Let's start with story number 10, which happened to a woman named Sarah in Seattle. She matched with a guy who seemed perfect on paper. Good job, nice photos, engaging conversation. They decided to meet for dinner at a restaurant downtown. Everything seemed fine at first. The conversation was flowing, they were laughing, and Sarah was thinking this might actually turn into something. Then about halfway through dinner, her date excused himself to go to the bathroom. While he was gone, the waiter came over and quietly told Sarah that her date had been there 3 times that week with 3 different women, and each time he had left without paying the bill. The waiter showed her security footage on his phone from the previous dates. Sarah's date would excuse himself to the bathroom and literally just leave through the back exit, sticking his date with the entire bill. But here's where it gets worse. The waiter mentioned that one of the women had come back to report that after she paid and left, she noticed someone following her to her car. When she got home and checked her dating app, her date had unmatched with her, but she had also received several anonymous messages on other social media platforms from someone who knew details about where she lived. Sarah immediately paid for just her meal and left before her date came back. She later found out through a local Facebook group that this guy was running some kind of scam where he'd go on dates, dine and dash, but also somehow use the dates to gather information about women for reasons nobody could quite figure out. Police got involved, but the guy had used fake names and information on all his profiles. Story number 9 involves a man named James who matched with someone on a dating app while traveling for work in Denver. She suggested they meet at a bar near his hotel. Simple enough. James shows up, orders a drink, and waits. His date arrives about 15 minutes late, apologizing and saying traffic was terrible. They start talking, having drinks, and James is having a decent time. Then his date suggests they go to another bar she knows that has better drinks. James agrees, and they walk about 3 blocks to this other location. The moment they walk in, James realizes something feels off. The bar is nearly empty except for 3 guys sitting in the corner who immediately look at him when he enters. His date suggests they sit at a specific table near the back. James, now feeling suspicious, says he needs to use the bathroom first. Once inside the bathroom, he checks his wallet and realizes his credit card is missing. He had it at the first bar, but now it's gone. He texts his friend the situation and his location, then comes out of the bathroom. His date is now sitting with the 3 guys from the corner, and they're all staring at him. James walks straight past the table, out the front door, and basically runs back to his hotel. Later that night, his bank alerts him to attempted charges on his card at various locations around Denver. Someone had pickpocketed him at some point during the date, and his date was clearly in on it. The whole second bar situation was apparently a setup in case he noticed his card was missing. Those guys were there to intimidate him. Or worse, if things went sideways. James filed a police report, but his date had deleted her profile immediately after, and the bar claimed they had no security cameras. Number 8 is where things start getting really dark. Number 8 is where things start getting really dark. A woman named Michelle from Austin matched with someone who claimed to be a doctor. They exchanged messages for about 2 weeks before agreeing to meet. He suggested a hike at a popular trail spot. Michelle, being safety conscious, told multiple friends where she was going and even shared her location with them. She met her date at the trailhead parking lot in the middle of the day with plenty of other people around. They started hiking, and the conversation was fine. About 20 minutes into the hike, they reached a fork in the trail. The main trail continued straight with clear markings and other hikers visible ahead. Her date suggested they take the side trail because it had a better view. Michelle declined, saying she preferred to stick to the main trail. Her date became insistent, almost pushy about taking the side trail. He kept saying things like the view was worth it and they'd only be gone for 10 minutes. Michelle's gut told her something was wrong, so she firmly said no, and that she was actually ready to head back. Her date's entire demeanor changed. He went from friendly and charming to cold and irritated in seconds. He said fine and started walking back with her, but he was walking slightly behind her the whole time, which made Michelle extremely uncomfortable. When they got back to the parking lot, Michelle quickly said goodbye and got in her car. As she was pulling out, she noticed her date wasn't getting into any vehicle. He was just standing there watching her leave. Confused and creeped out, Michelle drove away but decided to loop back around after a few minutes to see if his car was there. When she came back, her date was still in the parking lot. But now he was talking to another woman who had just parked. Michelle rolled down her window and yelled to the woman that the guy was dangerous and to stay away from him. Her date saw her, and his face contorted into this expression of pure rage. He started walking toward Michelle's car fast. She drove off immediately and called the police. Later, through some investigation by local authorities, they discovered this guy had a history of assault charges in another state and had been using dating apps under fake names to lure women to isolated areas. Michelle was incredibly lucky that she trusted her gut and stayed on the main trail. Let's talk about number 7. This one happened to a guy named Marcus in Philadelphia. He matched with someone, and after chatting for a while, she invited him over to her apartment for dinner. Marcus thought it was moving a bit fast, but figured why not. She gave him her address, and he showed up with a bottle of wine. But when he knocked on the door, a completely different woman answered. Not just different from the photos, but like a totally different person. The woman seemed confused when Marcus introduced himself and mentioned the dating app. She said she had no idea what he was talking about and wasn't on any dating apps. Marcus showed her the messages and the profile. The woman's face went pale. Someone had stolen her photos and created a fake profile using her actual address. They both stood there in shock, realizing that someone had catfished Marcus using this woman's identity and sent him to her real home. But here's the terrifying part. While they were talking in the doorway trying to figure out what was happening, Marcus noticed someone across the street in a parked car watching them. When Marcus pointed it out, the car immediately drove off fast. They called the police, and the theory was that someone had created the fake profile to either rob Marcus when he showed up with valuables or to stalk the woman whose photos were stolen. Either way, someone was orchestrating the whole thing and watching it unfold. The police traced the dating app profile, but it had been created using fake information and a VPN, making it nearly impossible to track. Both Marcus and the woman ended up filing restraining orders against unknown parties and had to take serious security precautions for months. Number 6 involves a woman named Rachel who matched with someone who seemed great. After a few days of messaging, he suggested they meet for drinks. They met at a popular bar downtown on a busy Friday night. Everything seemed normal at first. They ordered drinks, talked, laughed. But then Rachel started feeling really weird, like dizzy and disoriented, but she had only had one drink. She remembers telling her date that she didn't feel well, and he immediately offered to help her get outside for fresh air. Rachel, even in her impaired state, knew something was very wrong. She pushed away from her date and stumbled toward the bar, where she grabbed the bartender and said she thought she'd been drugged. The bartender immediately called security and an ambulance. Her date tried to leave, but security stopped him at the door. When Rachel's drink was tested later at the hospital, it came back positive for a sedative. Her date had waited until she was distracted and slipped something into her drink. The guy was arrested, and it turned out he had done this before to other women he'd met on dating apps. Some of those women didn't realize what was happening in time, and horrible things happened to them. Rachel was incredibly fortunate that she recognized the symptoms and got help immediately. The guy ended up being charged with multiple counts of assault and attempted kidnapping. Rachel had to go through months of therapy to deal with the trauma, and she says she'll never use a dating app again. Story number 5 gets even worse. A man named David from Chicago matched with someone, and they decided to meet at a coffee shop. The date seemed to go well. They talked for about an hour, exchanged numbers, and made plans to meet again. A few days later, his date texted him asking if he wanted to come over to watch a movie. David agreed and drove to the address she gave him. It was an apartment building in a decent neighborhood. He texted when he arrived, and she told him to come up to apartment 312. David went inside, took the elevator up, and knocked on the door of apartment 312. A man answered. David, confused, asked if he had the wrong apartment. The man said no, this was 312. David explained he was there to meet someone from a dating app. The man's face changed to anger, and he asked for the name. When David told him, the man revealed that was his girlfriend, and they'd been together for 3 years. David showed him the messages. The girlfriend had been using dating apps to meet men and was apparently inviting them over when her boyfriend wasn't home. But on this particular night, the boyfriend had come home early. The situation got tense fast. The boyfriend was understandably furious, but thankfully he believed David was a victim in this too. The girlfriend then came to the door and started screaming at both of them. Neighbors came out, someone called the police. But here's where it gets dangerous. While all this chaos was happening, the girlfriend pulled a knife from the kitchen and started threatening both the boyfriend and David, saying if she couldn't have her life the way she wanted, nobody was getting out of that apartment. David ran. He literally just turned and ran down the stairs while calling 911. Police arrived and had to talk the woman down. She was eventually arrested and charged with assault with a deadly weapon. David later found out through the police investigation that this woman had been meeting multiple men from dating apps, some of whom she had stolen from or manipulated in various ways. Her boyfriend had no idea any of this was happening until David showed up that night. Now we're at number 4, and this is where these stories go from dangerous to absolutely terrifying. A woman named Lisa in Portland matched with someone who seemed successful and charming. They exchanged messages for several weeks, which made Lisa feel like she was getting to know him pretty well. They finally agreed to meet for dinner at a nice restaurant. The date went amazingly well. He was polite, interesting, asked questions about her life, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know her. They went on a second date, then a third. By the 4th date, Lisa was thinking this could actually turn into a serious relationship. On their 5th date, he invited her to his house for dinner, saying he wanted to cook for her. Lisa agreed, but she made sure to tell her friends where she was going and to text them every hour. She drove to his house, which was a nice place in the suburbs. He gave her a tour, showed her around, and everything seemed perfect. They had dinner, talked, and then he suggested they watch a movie. Lisa agreed. But while they were watching the movie, Lisa needed to use the bathroom. He directed her upstairs to the guest bathroom. Lisa went upstairs, found the bathroom, and that's when she noticed a door at the end of the hallway was slightly open with a faint light coming from inside. Curious, Lisa quietly walked over and peeked in. What she saw made her blood run cold. It was a room completely covered in photos. Photos of her. Photos from her social media that she'd posted years ago. Photos that looked like they'd been taken of her without her knowledge. At the grocery store, at her gym, walking her dog. There were dozens, maybe hundreds of photos of her plastered all over the walls. There was also a notebook on a desk filled with notes about her daily routine, her schedule, her friends' names. Lisa realized this man had been stalking her long before they'd matched on the dating app. He'd somehow found her, learned everything about her, and then created a dating profile specifically to match with her and make it seem like a normal meeting. Lisa's heart was pounding. She quietly backed away from the room, went into the bathroom, and locked the door. She texted her friends that she was in danger and gave them the address. Then she flushed the toilet and washed her hands, trying to act normal. She came back downstairs, and her date asked if everything was okay. Lisa said yes, but that she wasn't feeling well and needed to go home. He seemed disappointed, but walked her to the door. The moment Lisa got to her car, she drove straight to the police station. Police went to the man's house and found exactly what Lisa described. He was arrested and charged with stalking and harassment. During the investigation, police discovered he'd done this to other women too. He would find women he was attracted to, stalk them for weeks or months, create elaborate fake dating profiles, and manipulate the algorithm to make sure they matched. Some women never realized what was happening. Lisa was lucky she found that room. Number 3 is the one I mentioned at the beginning, and trust me, it's absolutely insane. A guy named Tom from Miami matched with someone, and they hit it off immediately. They went on several dates over the course of a month, and Tom was falling hard for this person. She was smart, funny, beautiful. Everything seemed perfect. She told him she worked as a nurse and had a busy schedule, which explained why she could only meet certain days and times. Tom didn't think anything of it. After about 6 weeks of dating, she invited Tom to a work party at a hotel where her hospital was hosting an event. Tom was excited to meet her coworkers and friends. He showed up to the hotel in a suit, ready to make a good impression. But when he walked into the event space and found his date, she was standing next to a man with his arm around her waist. Tom walked up confused, and his date's face went completely white. The man introduced himself as her husband. Tom stood there in shock. His date tried to play it off, saying Tom was just a friend from the gym, but the husband wasn't buying it. Tom said they'd been dating for 6 weeks. The husband's face contorted in rage. But before things could escalate, another woman walked up and asked what was going on. This woman introduced herself as the husband's girlfriend. Apparently, the wife had been cheating on her husband, the husband had been cheating on his wife, and Tom had unknowingly become part of this insane web of lies. But it gets crazier. The girlfriend then revealed she was also married to someone else and had been using dating apps to meet multiple people while maintaining 3 separate relationships. The situation devolved into absolute chaos. Hotel security got involved, police were called, and Tom just left. He later found out through mutual friends that the woman he'd been dating was involved in some kind of relationship scheme where she and her husband had an open marriage but were lying to everyone they dated about their situation. They'd apparently scammed multiple people emotionally and financially. Tom felt like he'd dodged a bullet, but the whole experience messed him up for months. Story number 2 is legitimately horrifying. A woman named Amanda from Denver matched with someone who seemed great. They went on a few dates, and everything was going well. He suggested they go on a weekend trip together to a cabin he claimed his family owned in the mountains. Amanda was hesitant at first, but he showed her photos of the beautiful cabin, and she agreed. She told several friends where she was going and sent them the address. They drove up to the mountains together, which was about a 2-hour drive. When they arrived at the cabin, it was exactly like the photos. Beautiful, secluded, peaceful. The first evening was nice. They cooked dinner together, talked by the fireplace. Amanda went to bed that night thinking she'd made a good decision. But the next morning, everything changed. Amanda woke up and went downstairs to find her date acting completely different. He was cold, distant, and kept pacing around nervously. Amanda asked if everything was okay, and he snapped at her to sit down and be quiet. Amanda's instincts immediately went into overdrive. She realized her phone had no service up in the mountains, which she'd known before coming, but now it felt dangerous. Her date then told her they needed to talk. He sat down across from her and revealed that the cabin didn't belong to his family. He'd broken into it. The owners were out of town, and he'd been squatting there for weeks. He said he'd brought other women there too. Amanda's blood ran cold. She asked what happened to the other women, and he just stared at her without answering. Amanda knew she was in serious danger. She told him she needed to use the bathroom, and he said fine, but to leave the door open. Amanda went to the bathroom, and that's when she noticed a small window. It was high up and small, but she thought she could fit through it. She quietly closed the door despite his protest and locked it. He started banging on the door immediately, yelling at her to open it. Amanda climbed onto the toilet, pushed the window open, and squeezed through. She fell about 6 feet onto the ground outside, scraping her arms and legs badly. She could hear him inside the cabin screaming and trying to break down the bathroom door. Amanda ran into the woods. She had no phone, no idea which direction led to the main road, but she just ran. She ran for what felt like hours, eventually coming across a hiking trail. She followed the trail until she found other hikers, and they called the police. Police went to the cabin and arrested her date. During the investigation, they found evidence that linked him to several missing persons cases. The other women he'd brought to that cabin were never found. Amanda barely escaped with her life, and she credits her gut instinct and that bathroom window for saving her. And finally, number 1. This story comes from a man named Chris in Los Angeles. He matched with someone who seemed amazing. They talked for weeks before meeting, which made Chris feel comfortable. They finally met for coffee, and the chemistry was instant. They started dating regularly, seeing each other several times a week. After about 2 months, his girlfriend invited Chris to meet her family. She said her parents were having a barbecue and wanted to meet him. Chris agreed, excited to take that step in the relationship. She gave him the address, and he drove there on a Saturday afternoon. But when he pulled up to the house, something felt off. There were no cars in the driveway, no signs of a barbecue, no decorations or people. Chris texted his girlfriend saying he was outside. She texted back telling him to come to the backyard through the side gate. Chris walked around the house to the side gate, opened it, and walked into the backyard. It was empty. No people, no barbecue, nothing. Then he heard the gate slam shut behind him. He turned around to see 3 men standing there blocking his exit. His girlfriend appeared from the back door of the house. She told Chris this wasn't a family barbecue. She and these men had been targeting people on dating apps, getting them to fall for fake relationships, and then robbing them when they were vulnerable. They demanded Chris give them his wallet, phone, keys, and tell them where he lived so they could rob his apartment too. Chris refused. One of the men pulled out a weapon. Chris, who had taken self-defense classes, made a split-second decision to fight back. He rushed at the closest man, knocked him down, and ran past him through the backyard toward the back fence. He jumped the fence, landing in a neighbor's yard. He could hear the men chasing him. Chris ran through multiple backyards, hopped several fences until he reached a street. He flagged down a car and begged them to call the police. The driver let him in and drove him directly to a police station. Chris filed a report, and police went to the house. The people were gone, but they'd left behind evidence. Through investigation, police discovered this group had been doing this for over a year, targeting men on dating apps, building fake relationships for weeks or months, and then robbing them. Some victims had been seriously injured. Some had been held against their will for hours while their apartments were ransacked. The group was eventually caught and arrested, but the ringleader, Chris's fake girlfriend, had a record of similar schemes going back almost a decade. Chris says he'll never trust anyone he meets online again, and that the experience gave him serious trust issues that he's still working through in therapy. So there you have it. 10 dating app encounters that went from casual swipes to genuinely life-threatening situations. These stories are exactly why you should always meet in public places, tell multiple people where you're going, trust your gut instincts, and maybe do a quick background check before meeting someone from the internet. Stay safe out there, and maybe think twice before swiping right on that too-good-to-be-true profile. Subscribe for more wild stories.